Just starting the live. Happy Thanksgiving. Hello, Dad, say hello. We're live.
Who that?
We're just live. Babe, say hi.
Hello, hello, hello.
Mom, she did all the cooking, thank God. Have a great time with your family. I'm glad my family's here. Woo!
It was a quiet day in Colorado Springs, but for Tashiana Blake, it would be her last. On that fateful evening, she was found lifeless in her home, the victim of a brutal and senseless crime. Her husband, Dermot Blake, a soldier at Fort Carson, had taken her life in an unexpected act of violence. What made the situation even more tragic was that their young daughters were inside the house and witnessed everything. Tashiana had been a devoted mother and wife. She had dreams for her family, a vision of a peaceful home where her daughters could grow up safe and happy. But on this day, everything changed. Dermot, the man who promised to protect her, had become the very danger she had feared. What could have led to such a horrifying turn of events? How did things go so wrong? Dermot Blake was arrested shortly after the incident. The police investigation revealed the terrifying details of the evening's events, but many questions remained unanswered. What caused Dermot, a man trained to serve and protect, to commit such an unspeakable act against a woman he vowed to love? And how could a seemingly normal family fall victim to such a horrifying tragedy? The community, still reeling from the shock, was left to grapple with the truth. The loss of Tashiana Blake sent ripples of sadness throughout Colorado Springs, but also highlighted a deeper, more troubling issue: the hidden dangers of domestic violence and the lives it destroys. Stay with us as we explore the chilling details of this case, the investigation, and the heart-wrenching impact on a family left behind. Through Tashiana's story, we'll uncover the unsettling reality of what can happen when trust is shattered and violence takes hold. If you enjoy real crime stories that uncover the truth, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us share real cases, spread awareness, and give a voice to those who can't speak for themselves. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Tashiana Blake was a woman who worked very hard to take care of her family. She wasn't just any mother. She was someone who wanted the best for her children. She worked every day to make sure they had everything they needed to grow up happy and healthy. Tashiana dreamed of giving her two young daughters a better life, one where they wouldn't have to worry about anything. She loved her daughters very much, and they loved her back. Tashiana was known by her friends and family as a caring mother. She would always go out her way to make sure that her daughters were safe, happy, and had the things they needed. She also loved spending time with them, playing with them, and teaching them important lessons about life. Tashiana's love for her daughters was clear to everyone around her. She worked hard to be a good role model, always trying to set a positive example. Tashiana was married to a man named Dermot Blake. Dermot was a soldier, and he worked at Fort Carson, a military base in Colorado. At the beginning of their relationship, everything seemed perfect. They had a strong bond and were very much in love with each other. Dermot, being a soldier, had a lot of pride in his job, and Tashiana was proud of him for serving his country. They both had dreams of a happy life together, with their children growing up in a safe and loving environment. Tashiana and Dermot met a few years before they got married. At first, everything seemed to be going well. They shared many things in common and enjoyed spending time together. Dermot was caring, and Tashiana was supportive. They made many plans for their future, including buying a house and raising a family. They talked about how they would spend the years ahead, making sure their children had the best education and opportunities. Everything seemed like it was going to be perfect. However, as time went on, things began to change. Though their early years together were full of love and shared dreams, small problems started to creep into their relationship. Dermot's behavior started to change. He became more distant, and Tashiana began to notice that he wasn't as loving and supportive as he once was. There were times when he seemed to be upset for no reason, and their arguments started to become more frequent. Still, Tashiana tried to keep things together for the sake of their children. She hoped that things would improve and that they would get back to how they used to be. Before the tragedy, Tashiana and Dermot lived together with their 2 daughters in a quiet neighborhood in Colorado Springs. Their family seemed like any other family on the outside. Tashiana was a caring mother, and Dermot worked hard to provide for his family. The girls adored their mother, always looking up to her and wanted to spend time with her. They often played together, went to the park, and had fun like any other children would. The family was close-knit, and they did things together as a unit. Tashiana made sure that her daughters felt loved and safe. She was always there for them, whether they needed help with schoolwork, wanted to talk about their day, or just needed a hug. Dermot, although he worked a lot, did his best to be a father to his daughters. He was there for family dinners, and he would spend time with them when he was home. However, as mentioned earlier, his relationship with Tashiana started to shift, and the tension in the house began to grow. Despite the growing problems between Tashiana and Dermot, they both still tried to keep their family life as normal as possible. Tashiana would often tell her daughters that everything would be okay, even if things didn't seem perfect. She wanted them to feel secure, not realizing that. The situation was slowly becoming more dangerous for her. The family continued their daily routine, but behind the closed doors of their home, things were starting to unravel. As the tension grew, Tashiana's love for her daughters remained the most important thing in her life. She wanted to protect them and make sure they were always happy. She never expected the tragedy that would soon unfold, but in her heart, she believed that she could fix things, that everything would go back to the way it was before the problems began. However, this was not the case, and the peaceful family life that they once had would soon be shattered. It was a regular evening in Colorado Springs when the tragedy occurred. Tashiana Blake, a mother of 2 young daughters, was at home with her husband, Dermot Blake, who was a soldier at Fort Carson. On the outside, their family seemed like many others, mom, dad, and kids, living in a peaceful neighborhood. However, that night would change everything forever. The evening began like any other. Tashiana made dinner for family, and they ate together as a family in their home. There was nothing unusual about the day, and everything seemed calm. But there were signs that not everything was well in the relationship between Tashiana and Dermot. Tension had been building up in their marriage for some time. People around Tashiana noticed small changes in Dermot's behavior. He had become more distant and sometimes angry, though nothing obvious to suggest that things were getting worse. That night, however, the situation escalated. It seemed like the final straw in a series of troubling events. No one outside the family knew what was truly happening behind closed doors, but on this night, it would become tragically clear. Tashiana, like most people in an abusive relationship, tried to keep things calm for the sake of her daughters. But in the moments leading up to the murder, she realized that things were spiraling out of control. As the evening unfolded, Dermot's anger grew more intense. There was a confrontation. In the chaos of that moment, Tashiana said the words that would become haunting in hindsight. "I'm sorry." But what did she mean by this? "I'm sorry" could have been an attempt to calm Dermot down, to smooth over whatever had caused his anger. In many cases of domestic violence, the victim tries to apologize or make peace, hoping to avoid further violence. Tashiana's words were likely her attempt to de-escalate the situation, but no apology could stop what was about to happen. At this point, the situation turned violent. Dermot's anger had reached a dangerous peak. Without warning, Dermot attacked Tashiana. He killed her in a violent act that shocked everyone who learned the details. The final act of violence ended Tashiana's life quickly, and there was nothing anyone could do to save her. The violent nature of the act left people in disbelief. How could a man who had promised to protect his family do such a thing? What was even more shocking was that this all happened in front of their young daughters. In the chaos of the violence, Dermot did not think about the consequences or the lives of his children. His actions changed their lives forever. The most heartbreaking part of the story is that Tashiana's 2 young daughters were witnesses to their mother's murder. They were in the house when everything happened. The girls saw everything. They witnessed a horrifying moment when their father took their mother's life. No child should ever have to go through such a traumatic experience, especially in their own home. The young girls did not understand everything that was happening, but they saw enough to know that something was terribly wrong. The impact on the girls was immediate and long-lasting. They were scared, confused, and in shock. In a moment, their world was turned upside down. The man they had known as their father was no longer someone they could trust. Their mother, the person who loved and cared for them, was gone. It would take a long time for them to process the full extent of what they had seen. Their lives would never be the same again. For the young daughters, the emotional toll of witnessing such a traumatic event was unimaginable. They did not fully understand why their father had done what he did. Children often struggle to make sense of such violent acts, especially when they come from a person they loved and trusted. The trauma these girls faced was something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. While they were physically safe after murder, the emotional scars were deep. Witnessing the murder of a parent is a form of trauma that can affect children in many ways, including through anxiety, fear, confusion, and difficulty trusting others. As these young girls grew older, they would need help processing what they had seen and finding a way to heal from the tragedy. After the tragic night when Tashiana Blake was murdered, the police quickly became involved in solving the crime. They wanted to find out what happened and who was responsible for taking Tashiana's life. Here's how the investigation unfolded step by step. When the murder happened, the police were called to the scene right away. Neighbors and witnesses had heard the screaming and called 911. Police officers arrived at the house, and they immediately started investigating. They knew that they had to find out the truth to bring justice for Tashiana. The police began by speaking to the people who were there at the house. Tashiana's 2 young daughters were there, and they had witnessed what happened. They were very scared and confused, but they told the police what they had seen. This was very important because the children were the only people who could describe exactly what happened that night. The first thing the police did was gather all the evidence from the scene. They took photos of the house and the area around it. They also looked for anything that might help explain what happened. The officers found signs of a struggle in the living room, which told them that there was a fight before Tashiana was killed. Next, the police spoke to Dermot Blake, Tashiana's husband. Dermot was the last person to see Tashiana alive. At first, Dermot said he didn't know what happened, but the police didn't believe him. They knew they had to look deeper to find the truth. The police also checked Dermot's phone records and his history. They wanted to know if there were any messages or calls that could give them more information. They found that Dermot had been acting strangely in the days leading up to the murder. He had sent some threatening messages to Tashiana, which made the police more suspicious of him. The police didn't waste any time. After collecting the evidence, they arrested Dermot Blake for the murder of his wife. They had found several pieces of evidence that pointed to him as the killer. First, the children's testimony was important, as they told the police that Dermot was the one who had hurt their mother. Second, the police found a gun in Dermot's car. The gun was traced to Dermot, and it had fingerprints on it. The gun was also found to be the weapon that killed Tashiana. This was a huge clue that made the police sure of his involvement in the crime. Lastly, the police found signs of a fight in the house. They found broken furniture and evidence that Tashiana had tried to protect herself before she was killed. This showed that Tashiana had tried to fight back, but unfortunately, she didn't survive. Once Dermot was arrested, he was taken to court to stand trial for the murder of his wife. The trial was an important process where the court would decide if Dermot was guilty or innocent. In the courtroom, the prosecution, which is a lawyer for the people, argued that Dermot was guilty of killing his wife. They presented all the evidence that the police had found, the children's testimony, the gun, and the signs of a struggle in the house. They said that Dermot had planned to hurt Tashiana, and that he was the one who killed her in cold blood. They also argued that Dermot's actions showed he had no regard for his family, and that he deserved to be punished for what he did. Dermot's defense team, on the other hand, tried to argue that he wasn't guilty. They said that there wasn't enough evidence to prove that Dermot was a killer. They suggested that maybe something went wrong during a fight, and that Dermot didn't mean to hurt Tashiana. They tried to make the case that Dermot wasn't a dangerous person, and that this was an accident, even though the evidence didn't support that claim. After the trial, The jury, a group of people who listened to all the evidence and arguments, made their decision. They found Dermot Blake guilty of murdering his wife, Tashiana Blake. The jury believed that Dermot had intentionally killed Tashiana and that he deserved to be punished for his actions. The judge sentenced him to life in prison for the murder of his wife, Tashiana Blake. In addition to the life sentence, he received 2 consecutive 12-month sentences for 2 counts of child abuse, bringing the total to a minimum of 25 years in prison. This sentence was handed down after a jury found him guilty of first-degree murder and child abuse following a trial in El Paso County, Colorado. The sentence was a way of holding him accountable for taking Tashiana's life. The court also made sure that Dermot would be kept away from his family for a long time, so he couldn't hurt anyone else. This trial was important because it showed that even when someone tries to hide the truth, the police and the courts can find the evidence to make sure that justice is done. It also reminded people that it's never okay to hurt others, no matter what the reason is. In the end, Tashiana's family and friends hoped that the trial would bring them some peace, even though they would never forget what happened. They knew that justice had been served, but nothing would bring Tashiana back. This case showed how important it is for people to stay safe and to speak out if they see something wrong in a relationship. Tashiana Blake's death affected her family, especially her 2 young daughters. They had to witness something no child should ever see. Their mother's life being taken by their father, the person who was supposed to protect her. The pain they felt from this terrible event is unimaginable. Tashiana's daughters were not only left without their mother, but they also had to carry the memory of what they saw that night. The emotional toll on them has been deep. Growing up without their mother is something they will struggle with for a long time, and no one can truly understand the kind of hurt they carry inside. Her family and friends also felt the loss deeply. They could not understand why this happened. How could someone they trusted, someone who was supposed to protect their family, hurt them in such a terrible way? Her loved ones had to adjust to life without her. They now focus on honoring her memory and ensuring her children are cared for. The story of Tashiana Blake shows how dangerous domestic violence can be. It often starts in small ways, but over time, it can become deadly. This case helps remind us of how important it is to understand the signs of abuse in relationships. In many cases, the person being hurt feels trapped, scared, or unsure how to get help. The more we understand what domestic violence looks like, the better we can protect those we love. So, what can we do to prevent this kind of tragedy from happening again? First, we need to be aware of the warning signs of abuse. These can include controlling behaviors, threats, or physical harm. If you notice any of these signs in someone's relationship, it's important to step in and offer help. We also need to make sure that people know where to go for support. There are organizations and hotlines that can provide help to people in dangerous situations. People who are being hurt need to feel that they can trust someone, and that help is available to them, no matter what. Domestic violence can happen to anyone, and it's important for us all to understand what it is and how it works. Abuse doesn't just involve hitting or physical harm. It can also include emotional abuse, threats, and controlling behaviors that make a person feel scared or powerless. What are the signs of abuse? Some signs of abuse in a relationship might be if one person is always trying to control the other, making them feel afraid or isolated. If someone is constantly being put down, threatened, or hurt, it is a sign of abuse. These can be hard to spot, especially if the abuser is good at hiding their actions from others. But recognizing these signs early can help people get the support they need before things get worse. Why do many victims stay in abusive relationships? It's difficult for someone in an abusive relationship to leave. They might feel scared, unsure where to go, or think they will never be able to survive without their partner. Sometimes, they may feel like they're the ones to blame for what's happening. It's also common for the abuser to say they will change, which can confuse the victim into thinking things will get better. But most of the time, the abuse only gets worse. What should you do if you suspect someone is in danger? If you think someone you know is in an abusive relationship, it's important to talk to them and let them know you're there for them. Encourage them to seek help from a professional. Don't ignore the signs. Taking action could save their life. It's also important to keep in mind that leaving an abuser is difficult, and the victim needs time and support to make that decision. How can friends, family, and neighbors help? Friends, family, and neighbors can play a huge role in helping someone who is being abused. Sometimes, the victim feels alone or like they have no way out. If you suspect something is wrong, check in with them. Let them know you care and offer them resources for help, like local shelters or support hotlines. What are the resources available for those who need support? There are many organizations that can help someone who is in an abusive relationship. Domestic violence shelters, support, groups, and hotlines are available to provide a safe space and guidance. One of the most well-known hotlines in the U.S. is the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE. These resources can be life-saving and can offer advice on how to leave an unsafe situation. Tashiana Blake's story is a painful reminder how trust and love can be broken in the worst way. It shows us that even people we think we know well can hide dark secrets, and those secrets can cause harm. Tashiana's death teaches us to always be aware of the signs of abuse in relationships and to never ignore the warnings. We must do everything we can to protect others from becoming victims of violence. By understanding what domestic violence looks like and providing resources for those in need, we can help save lives. Tashiana's story also teaches us the importance of standing up for those who are suffering in silence and offering help before it's too late. Remember, always be vigilant and don't ignore warning signs. We can all make a difference by looking out for each other and ensuring that no one has to face domestic violence alone. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.